Black Panther was the first superhero movie to be nominated for a Best Picture Oscar, and the movie made over $1.3 billion in revenue. Central to the appeal of this blockbuster was its hero, Chadwick Boseman. On 29 August 2020, Hollywood lost its superhero to cancer, and Chadwick Boseman will always be remembered as an actor who brought intelligence and warmth to his starring role in the Marvel superhero blockbuster Black Panther. In India, since 14 June 2020, late Bollywood star Sushant Singh Rajput is the talking point on all TV channels. So I've got for you a couple of his movies, and you have to guess the title of the movie. Are you game? Name the movie. If you said PK, you have guessed it right. For those who did not, here's another chance. Which movie is this one? Well, I'm sure everybody has guessed it right this time around. It is Dil Bechara. Guess this one. Yes, it is MS Dhoni, The Untold Story. The real-life hero and the on-screen hero of this movie both share common homeland, that is Bihar. You may point out that Dhoni is from Jharkhand. True, but he was born in Bihar. How's that? Till the year 2000, Jharkhand was a part of Bihar. It was carved out of Bihar on 15th November 2000. So Dhoni was born in Bihar and from 2000 became a native of Jharkhand. Sushant Singh Rajput was a native of Bihar, and the reason I'm highlighting Bihar is that's where our history lesson takes us today. In Dhoni's Ranchi, there are many educational institutes in the name of Birsa. The Birsa Institute of Technology and the Birsa Agricultural University. So Birsa has got to be a great man, and he is. Here is the Defence Minister of India, Shri Rajnath Singh, paying homage to Birsa. And here we have Home Minister Amit Shah paying homage to Birsa. Birsa Munda was a tribal leader who launched a fight to drive the British out of their forest land. He was a great revolutionary, and therefore he is a revered figure today. So let us learn about the real hero of Jharkhand, Birsa Munda, in our chapter, Tribal, Dikus and the Vision of a Golden Age. Birsa Munda became famous in 1895 when he was going around the forests and villages of Chota Nagpur in Jharkhand, as people believed he had miraculous powers. They believed he could cure all diseases and multiply grain. Birsa himself declared that God had appointed him to save his people from trouble, free them from slavery of Dikus, that is, outsiders. Soon, thousands began following Birsa, believing that he was Bhagwan and would solve all their problems. Birsa was born in a family of the Munda tribe, and that's where he gets his last name or surname, Munda. But his followers included people from other tribes as well, such as Santals and Oraons. All the tribals were unhappy as their livelihood and religion were in danger under the British rule. Their traditional occupations were in danger as the British imposed a new set of rules. What then were the tribal occupations? Before we look at that, let us visit a few tribes from north to south and west to east of India. Gaudas, Kunbis, Velips and Dangars are the four tribes of Goa, but we hardly get to see them living their traditional lifestyle. In fact, every tribe across the length and breadth of India has changed as they mix up with village and city people. We get to see tribal attires only at cultural festivals and in Goa at the Grand Carnival. Moving to northern India, this is the Gujjar Bakarwal tribe of Jammu and Kashmir region. Ladakh, which is a union territory now, this is the famous Chengpa tribe of Ladakh that produces world famous Pashmina shawls. Moving to southern India, here is the Pania tribe found in the regions of Wayanad, Kerala. And in the western region, I picked Dadra and Nagar Haveli to revise our geographical knowledge. For those who did not know, on 26 January 2020, the Union Territory of Daman and Diu and the Union Territory of Dadra and Nagar Haveli were merged as one Union Territory. Hence, I have chosen a Nagar Haveli tribe, that is, Varli tribe, engaged in their Tarpa dance. And this is the famed Varli painting, and today you get fabric as well in Varli prints. Eastern India has a wide variety of tribes. This is the Kasi tribe. And here is a picture of one of the tribes of Nagaland. Having taken a very short tour of some of the tribes in India, and most of these are fast losing their culture and traditions. Let us look at their traditional occupations before the arrival of the British in India. The tribal people lived in the forests and not in villages, and they depended on the forests for their livelihood. They would clear a part of the forest to grow crops. Let us learn how they did that through this video.
아버지 내고 와. Bokta. Memhapkan lah sini bokta. 같이 들린다네 완마.
Jhum cultivation is a term used for this kind of cultivation, which is also known as shifting cultivation. A part of the forest was cleared so that sun would reach the ground. Just like other plants, crops too require sunlight to grow and bear crops. After leaving the chopped trees to dry up for a few days, they would then set it on fire, and the ash was used as a fertilizer. Across India, many farmers use ash for their fields till date. Stubble burning in Punjab and Haryana grabbed national headlines every year as Delhi complains of pollution. Back to our topic, ash was used as a fertilizer in the slash and burn cultivation as it was rich in potash. They would then use the hoe to scratch the soil and scatter the seeds which would sprout and grow. Once the crop was ready and harvested, they would not use the same land to grow crops again. They would leave that land untouched for many years, till small saplings, plants grew into trees on that patch of land. They cared for the ecosystem. Till then, they would move to another area of the hill and clear the land and grow crops. The forest was the common property of the tribal people, and they could move freely across the hills and mountains and use any part of the forest for cultivation. The tribal people also collected fruits, roots, and vegetables from the forest for their food and hunted animals. Hunting was a common practice among the tribals, and it required great skill and alertness. This tells us that originally humans depended on anything and everything for their survival, and there was no classification as vegetarian and non-vegetarian. The Kond community of Odisha went on collective hunts and then divided the meat among themselves. This is the Kond tribe of Odisha and another man from the Kond tribe. They also ate fruits and roots collected from the forest and cooked food with the oil they extracted from the seeds of sal and mahua. Today, we find many books and websites with information on medicinal herbs. In fact, coronavirus or COVID-19 has forced us to look at herbal remedies. The tribal people had vast knowledge of medicinal plants and herbs and never needed any doctors. Even the Kalbelia tribe of snake charmers used forest shrubs and herbs to treat village people who were bitten by a snake. The local cloth weavers and leather workers depended on the Kond tribe for the supply of kusum and palash flowers to color their clothes and leather. Not everything can be produced in the forest, so the tribal people would sell forest produce in the villages and buy essential grains and pulses with their small earnings. The forests never used any currency, but money is required in the villages to buy anything. So some tribal people did odd jobs in the villages, carrying loads, building roads, or worked as labor in the fields. But the Baiga tribe of central India depended on the forest alone. They did not go to the villages in search of work. They believed it was below the dignity of a Baiga to work as a laborer. The need for money to buy goods not produced in the forest led to the dependence of tribals on local traders and moneylenders. Traders sold their goods at high prices, and moneylenders gave loans to tribals charging high interest rates. Thus, trade activities, which we call market and commerce, did not benefit tribal people. It buried them in debt and poverty. They were not poor, but made poor. Therefore, they saw traders and moneylenders as outsiders who were the cause of their misery and suffering. Many tribal groups lived by herding and rearing animals. These pastoralists moved from one place to another as per the season to find fodder for their livestock. Here are the Van Gujars of the Punjab hills. Here are the Lambaris of Andhra Pradesh who were cattle herders. The Gaddis of Kulu were shepherds. And the Bakarwals of Kashmir reared goats. Gradually, lifestyle began to change, and many of the tribal people began settling down and cultivating their fields in one place year after year. This was a shift away from their traditional practice of chum cultivation. They now plowed the fields and got rights over the land they lived on and cultivated. In the forests, most of the tribes were very clear about ownership of land. They had cleared land for cultivation and they owned the land as a whole, as a clan, as a tribe. The British ruling the subcontinent considered settled cultivators such as Gonds and Santals as more civilized than hunter-gatherers or shifting cultivators. The tribal people had their own administration headed by the tribal chief. In some places, they had their own police and made local rules for forest management. Under British rule, the functions of the tribal chiefs changed. They lost their administrative power and were forced to follow the rules made by the colonial rulers. The British did not favor nomadic tribes who kept on moving from one place to another. They wanted tribal people to settle down and become peasant cultivators, as it was easier to administer them and collect revenue from them. The British efforts to settle Jum cultivators were not very successful, as the tribal people did not want to abandon their age-old traditions of their ancestors. Settled cultivation was not easy in areas where water was scarce and land was dry. Jum cultivators in northeast India insisted and fought hard to continue their traditional farming practices. Facing widespread protest, the British had to allow them to continue Jum cultivation. This article in the Economic Times showcases government attempt to stabilize shifting cultivation. The second paragraph highlights the fact that 1.73 million hectares of land in India is under shifting cultivation, with an estimated 6.23 lakh families depending on it. And 90% of these are in northeast India. These are our fields, amchi sheta, amchi gereskai, and a very peaceful place where I often love to come and sit because it is very serene. This is also the very place where we cut the first sheaves of corn at the harvest festival to offer to God. Each plot, each field belongs to one family, and this is a perfect example of settled cultivation. Under British Raj, all forests were declared as state property. The forests were now classified as reserved forest, protected forest, and village forest. The British wanted timber or teak wood to supply to England to build ships and railways. Indian forests were now used to grow teak wood, and hence no tribals were allowed in the first two categories of forests. This directly affected the tribal communities, as they were now banned from moving freely in the forest to collect fruits or to collect firewood. Neither could they hunt nor could they practice Jum cultivation. Many tribals were thus forced to move to other areas in search of work and livelihood. Having driven the tribals out of the forest gave rise to a new problem for the British. There was no labor available to cut trees and to transport the logs. So they came up with a solution that would be very much acceptable to the tribal people because they loved their forests. They decided that they would give Jum cultivators small patches of land in the forest and allow them to cultivate on one condition. They would have to provide labor to the forest department and look after the forests. In this way, the British exploited the tribals and managed to get a regular supply of cheap labor. Many tribals protested against the forest laws. They disobeyed the new rules and continued with their traditional practices that were declared as illegal. There was the Songram Sangma revolt in Assam in 1906 and forest satyagrahas in central provinces in the 1930s. Warrior Elvin, an Englishman, visited the Baigas as he wanted to learn about their customs and practices, which he recorded in his book Songs of Maikal. Here is a Baiga song about the British rule in India. In this land of the English, how hard it is to live. How hard it is to live. In the village sits the landlord. In the gate sits the kotwar. In the garden sits the patwari. In the field sits the government. In this land of the English, how hard it is to live. To pay cattle tax, we have to sell cow. To pay forest tax, we have to sell buffalo. To pay land tax, we have to sell bullock. How are we to get our food in this land of the English? This brings to light the extreme hardships that the tribal people had to face due to the policies of the British. Regarding the outsiders, the tribal people found that traders and moneylenders were coming often to the forests to buy forest produce, offering cash loans and asking them to work for wages. And these were not British but our own countrymen. It took some time for the innocent tribals to understand what was happening. A classic case is that of the silk growers. In the 18th century, Indian silk was in great demand in the European markets. Hence, the East India Company tried to encourage silk production to meet the growing demands. In Hazaribagh, Jharkhand, the Santals reared cocoons. For those who may not know, cocoons are used to produce silk. Indian traders sent their agents to collect cocoons from the tribals and also provided loans to encourage rearing of cocoons. The tribals were paid rupees 3 or rupees 4 for 1,000 cocoons. These were then taken to Burdwan or Gaya, where they were sold for 5 times the price, that is rupees 20 for 1,000 cocoons. Thus, the middlemen earned huge profits and the Santals who reared cocoons earned very little. It is for this reason that the tribals saw traders as their main enemies. Struggling to survive and no forest to bank on, the tribals were forced to go to far places in search of work. They mostly found work in the tea plantations of Assam and also in the coal mines of Jharkhand, where the working conditions were very harsh. The picture description tells us that in the 1920s, about 50% of the miners in the Jaria and Raniganj coal mines of Bihar were tribals. Work deep down in the dark and suffocating mines was not only backbreaking and dangerous, it was often literally killing. In the 1920s, over 2,000 workers died every year in the coal mines in India. And none was bothered or worried about them. Many tribals revolted against the exploitation by traders and moneylenders and the unjust rules and taxes introduced by the British. The coal tribe rebelled in 1831 and 32. The Santals rose in revolt in 1855. The Bastar rebellion broke out in 1910 with Gunda Dur as the driving force of the rebellion. This Republic Day tableau salutes the indomitable spirit of Gunda Dur. And in the region of Bihar and present-day Jharkhand, there was a revolt under the leadership of Birsa Munda. Born in a Munda tribe, Birsa grew up in the forests of Bahonda grazing sheep, playing the flute and dancing in the local akhada. Poverty forced his father to move from place to place looking for work. As an adolescent, Birsa had heard tales of Munda uprising of the past. They talked of a golden age where Mundas would be free from oppression of the Dikus. So he spoke of starting the freedom movement or Mulk Ki Ladai. Birsa went to a local missionary school and heard missionary sermons that spoke of the kingdom of heaven and the possibility to regain their lost rights if they became Christian and gave up bad practices. Later, Birsa also spent time with a Vaishnav preacher and wore the sacred thread. Influenced by all these ideas, Birsa started a movement to reform tribal society. He urged the Mundas to stop drinking liquor, to clean their village like the Swachh Bharat mission of today, and to stop believing in witchcraft and sorcery. Birsa Munda was also against the missionaries and Hindu landlords as he viewed them as outsiders ruining the Munda way of life. In 1895, Birsa urged his followers to recover their glorious past. He talked of a golden age in the past, a Satyug, where Mundas lived a good life, constructed embankments, tapped natural springs, planted trees and orchards, and practiced cultivation to earn their living. They did not indulge in violence, but today we are consuming a lot of violence-based online content that subconsciously affects our mind, our behavior, and our attitudes. What worried the British was the political aim of Birsa movement, as he wanted to drive out missionaries, moneylenders, Hindu landlords, and importantly, set up a Munda Raj with Birsa as its head. As the movement spread, the British arrested Birsa in 1895 and jailed him for 2 years. In 1897, when Birsa was released from prison, he started going around the villages to gather support and urged his followers to destroy the Ravana, that is Dikus and the Europeans, and establish a kingdom under his leadership. Birsa's followers attacked police stations and churches in their fight against the Dikus. They also raided the property of moneylenders and zamindars. They raised the white flag as the symbol of the Birsa Raj. In the year 1900, Birsa died of cholera, and there was no leader after him to continue the movement. However, the movement led by Birsa was significant in at least 2 ways. It forced the colonial government to introduce laws so that the land of the tribals could not be easily taken over by the Dikus. It is for this reason that even today, no Indian citizen can buy land or property in a tribal belt. It is reserved for tribals alone. Secondly, it showed that the tribal people had the capacity to protest against injustice and revolt against the British. They did not wait for Dadabhai Nauroji, Tilak or Gandhi to speak for them and to fight for them. They were brave men and women who could organize themselves and fight against the mighty British on their own. It was a matter of their pride, their livelihood, and their posterity. Hope you enjoyed learning about the original inhabitants of India through this chapter. And the most important thing is to learn to respect the tribal people and their customs and practices. Thank you.